34 years old and drowning, not in water, but in the crushing weight of family expectations, completely blindsided by a betrayal that felt like a physical blow. 6 long, grueling years of tirelessly shouldering mortgage payments, endless medical bills, and making sacrifices that bled me dry, all while my deadbeat brother drifted through life on a cloud of charmed irresponsibility. Then, I found it tucked away, hidden, almost like a cruel joke. Their will. Every single valuable thing, bequeathed to him. Me? Nothing but a collection of forgotten, worthless china, gathering dust in the attic. The very second Mom's next casual demand for money pinged on my phone, the 2 words I typed back weren't just a response, they were a thunderclap, shattering decades of insidious manipulation, and ripping wide open the ugly, festering wound of golden children versus workhorses. What erupted next wasn't just a family argument, it was an earthquake that fundamentally reshaped every single thing I thought I knew about family, about boundaries, and about my own intrinsic worth. This wasn't merely about money or some dusty inheritance. No, this was about the agonizing, yet vital, discovery that sometimes, the very people who claim to love you most are the ones exploiting you the deepest, systematically siphoning off your strength and your soul. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, if you've ever watched your relentless efforts go unnoticed while others are praised for simply existing, this raw, unfiltered story will pierce you to the core. The awakening was brutal, merciless even, but undeniably, agonizingly necessary. Like this video if you understand, subscribe to join this journey of reclamation, and let me know in the comments below if you've ever found your own 2 words. My name is Natalie. At 34, I was certain I had a firm grasp on my place in this chaotic world. I was the rock, the reliable daughter, the dependable sister, the one who effortlessly juggled every single crisis while others, particularly my brother, danced through life with an enviable, infuriating carefree ease. That deeply ingrained certainty, that very foundation of my identity, imploded in a single, gut-wrenching afternoon. It happened when I stumbled upon a stack of documents that brutally illuminated just how little my family truly valued me, despite my years of unwavering, unquestioning support. Growing up in the unassuming rhythm of Cincinnati, with my parents Richard and Margaret, had molded me into a person who firmly believed that diligent hard work and unwavering responsibility were virtues that would inevitably be recognized and, more importantly, rewarded. Dad, a quiet man, crunched numbers with meticulous precision at a modest accounting firm, while Mom, with her gentle spirit, shaped young minds in the 3rd grade. We weren't wealthy, not by any stretch, but we enjoyed a comforting stability. Dad, ever the pragmatist, endlessly preached the gospel of financial wisdom and meticulous planning for the future lessons that would later echo with a cruel, mocking irony. The dynamics of our household were crystalline, visible even to a child's innocent eyes. Travis, my brother, 3 years my elder, possessed an almost magnetic charm, a siren song that drew people in like moths to a flickering flame. He could effortlessly have our parents doubled over with laughter, spinning elaborate tales, mimicking voices and mannerisms with a theatrical flair that left everyone enchanted, completely disarmed. But beneath that captivating charisma lay a deeply ingrained pattern of irresponsibility, a shadow that had emerged early and stubbornly refused to dissipate. Chores languished undone, ignored until multiple, exasperated reminders were issued. His bedroom resembled a disaster zone, a perpetual vortex of forgotten belongings and discarded dreams. Homework, like some mischievous phantom, vanished into the black holes of forgetfulness. Yet, somehow, miraculously, our parents always found excuses. Travis is just creative, Mom would coo, her voice laced with a tender indulgence, as she patiently stooped to pick up his scattered belongings from the common areas. Creative minds, darling, simply don't bother with mundane details. Your brother, Natalie, he sees the big picture, Dad would rationalize, his tone dismissive, whenever Travis inevitably failed yet another assignment. Details, you see, they just bog down visionaries. Meanwhile, I, with my meticulous habits, embodied responsibility incarnate. Assignments were not just submitted on time, they were early, perfectly executed. My room was maintained with an almost obsessive order. Rules. They were followed without question, without a murmur of protest. Yet, instead of effusive praise, this consistent, conscientious behavior was simply expected, as if conscientiousness itself were hardwired into my very DNA, rather than a conscious, deliberate choice I made, day after day. Of course, Natalie finished her project, they'd say, their voices matter of fact, devoid of surprise or particular pride. That's just who she is. College years only amplified these stark disparities, etching them deeper into my psyche. I scraped together every last penny for tuition, piecing it together through a grueling patchwork of student loans and 20-hour work weeks at the campus bookstore. 5 years instead of 4, because my demanding work schedules mercilessly limited my course loads. I eventually graduated, clutching a marketing degree and burdened with student debt, but also imbued with a fierce, quiet pride in my self-reliance. Travis, on the other hand, embarked on his academic journey at an exorbitantly expensive private university, his entire tuition generously, fully funded by our parents. He flitted between majors with the restless energy of a hummingbird, before ultimately abandoning the whole endeavor in his junior year to discover himself, through a vaguely defined European adventure. An extravagant escapade our parents bankrolled entirely, without a single complaint. College isn't for everyone, Mom rationalized upon his return, degree-less and utterly planless, her voice unwavering. Travis, you see, he just needs space to explore his boundless potential. What followed was a bewildering decade of failed ventures, each more ambitious, more fleeting than the last. Grand gourmet food truck dreams that evaporated into thin air. Lofty photography business aspirations that never quite developed. Fantastical imported furniture fantasies from Bali that remained firmly in the realm of imagination. Each pursuit ignited with an explosive, blinding enthusiasm, only to fizzle out the moment actual, sustained work became a non-negotiable requirement. And each, devastating failure was quietly, meticulously subsidized by our parents' steadily dwindling retirement savings, a silent hemorrhage of their future. I, meanwhile, methodically built my career, climbing the corporate ladder with a quiet determination, from an entry-level marketing assistant to a respected director. My ascent was a testament to strategic moves, grueling weekend courses, and a relentless, almost obsessive effort. By 30, I had not only achieved a comforting financial stability, but also a quiet, undeniable professional recognition. It was around this time that my parents' long-simmering financial troubles finally broke the surface, undeniable and urgent. The economic downturn had savagely decimated Dad's firm income, leaving them vulnerable. Mom's encroaching arthritis mercilessly forced a reduction in her teaching hours, further straining their already precarious finances. Medical expenses, like some relentless, insidious tide, mounted higher and higher, while mortgage payments began to fall dangerously behind. That, of course, was when I stepped in, initially covering what seemed like occasional emergencies: a broken appliance here, a leaking pipe there. But soon, almost imperceptibly, I found myself contributing a staggering $2,000 monthly, a non-negotiable sum, in addition to covering all their uncovered medical costs. Travis, predictably, continued his familiar pattern of brief, lackadaisical employment, invariably followed by a litany of creative, elaborate excuses for quitting. Managers simply didn't appreciate his innovative ideas, he'd claim. Jobs, he insisted, ruthlessly stifled his artistic spirit. He lived in a perpetually subsidized studio apartment, a comfortable perch paid for by someone else, and drove a sleek, new car, a lavish gift from our parents for his 30th birthday, a stark symbol of their misplaced priorities. Your brother is struggling, Natalie, Dad would patiently explain, his voice laced with a weary resignation, whenever I dared to suggest Travis might, perhaps, contribute something, anything. He simply doesn't possess your innate stability. You, Natalie, you were always the independent one, Mom would add, her tone almost a lament, as if self-sufficiency itself was some crushing burden, rather than a hard-won achievement to be celebrated. My small, steadfast support system remained an invaluable lifeline during these emotionally draining years. Melissa, my closest, most fiercely loyal friend, never hesitated to call out the glaring unfairness of it all during our sacred weekly coffee meetings. "They are using you, Nat," she'd declare bluntly, her eyes burning with righteous indignation. "You need to draw a line. You need boundaries." Daniel, my boyfriend, offered a more nuanced, gentle perspective. Having grown up himself in a family where obligation was a pervasive, unspoken rule, he understood my deep-seated desire to help, yet he also gently, persistently encouraged self-care, a concept I struggled to grasp. "You can absolutely support your parents," he'd advise, his voice soft yet firm, "without savagely sacrificing your entire future." Despite the mounting financial strain that relentlessly tightened its grip on my own life, I stubbornly continued my contributions. Home ownership, a dream I had cherished, was indefinitely delayed, replaced by the stark reality of a modest, uninspired rental. My aging car, a faithful but faltering companion, received endless, costly repairs instead of the replacement it so desperately needed. Vacations, once a distant possibility, vanished entirely from consideration. My retirement contributions, once robust, shamefully shrank to a trickle. All of it, every single sacrifice, because I clung to the naive, deeply ingrained belief that family, true family, meant mutual support, a shared burden, and an eventual, sweet recognition of my efforts. Travis, in stark contrast, rarely even visited, calling only on the most obligatory occasions: birthdays, holidays, the rare moment he actually needed something. Yet, our parents, with a bewildering display of selective memory, treated his minimal, grudging gestures as extraordinary achievements, while my consistent, unwavering support was simply taken for granted, an invisible given. Travis brought us flowers last weekend. Mom would gush, her voice overflowing with disproportionate pride, conveniently ignoring the fact that I had, in that very same week, paid for their groceries, meticulously cleaned their gutters, and patiently chauffeured Dad to his endless medical appointments. I never once demanded gratitude, not explicitly. But the relentless, almost obsessive praise showered upon Travis, while my own substantial contributions remained utterly invisible, began, slowly, inexorably, to erode my spirit, chipping away at my sense of worth. Still, I stubbornly clung to the delusion that this was merely temporary. Eventually, I reasoned, they would see. Eventually, they would recognize my boundless sacrifices. Eventually, Travis would, miraculously, mature. Eventually, surely, fairness would prevail. I was, catastrophically, heartbreakingly wrong. That pivotal Saturday in early April dawned like countless others, unremarkable in its quiet routine. Tax season had arrived, a yearly ritual of dread, and I had, with a sigh of weary resignation, volunteered to organize their overwhelming, chaotic paperwork. Mom, I noticed, seemed particularly frazzled by the sheer administrative chaos, her arthritic hands, gnarled and painful, making the simple act of document sorting an excruciating ordeal. "Thank God, you're here, darling," she greeted me, her voice a desperate, exhausted relief. "Your father, bless his heart, has papers everywhere, and I simply can't make sense of any of it." Dad, from the familiar depths of his worn recliner, acknowledged my arrival with a weary nod, his eyes fixed on the hypnotic flicker of a baseball game, his usual escape. "The files, Natalie, they are sheer chaos," he admitted, his voice raspy with an age-old weariness. "Getting old, my dear, it's brutal." I spent the entire morning, with painstaking precision, attempting to create order from their financial mayhem, establishing meticulous filing systems, and, in the process, identifying several glaring billing errors I promised to address. By lunchtime, their dining room table, usually a battleground of clutter, displayed neat, satisfying stacks of organized documents, a testament to my tireless efforts. "Before I completely forget," Mom said, her voice a sudden interruption, as she placed a humble sandwich before me, can you possibly locate our health insurance policy? I urgently need to call about that ridiculously denied physical therapy claim. Sure, Mom, I replied, my mouth full. Where might it be hiding this time? Probably, she mused, her gaze drifting, in your father's office. Check the filing cabinet. It's usually overflowing. Dad's office, a veritable shrine to his life, occupied what had once been my childhood bedroom, a space I had filled with dreams and youthful secrets. After my departure for college, it had undergone a curious metamorphosis, transforming into his undisputed domain, a cluttered sanctuary crammed with dusty books, precariously stacked papers, and 4 decades of accounting memorabilia. The overflowing filing cabinet, a hulking, metallic beast, stood sentinel in the corner, documents spilling from every drawer, a testament to unchecked entropy. I began my methodical search, carefully, painstakingly creating organized piles on his desk as I worked, a small island of order in a sea of paper. Deep within the chaotic depths of the bottom drawer, my fingers brushed against a large, suspiciously heavy manila envelope. It was labeled, in Dad's familiar, precise script, Will and Testament updated January 23. Just 3 months prior. The unsealed flap, almost invitingly, yawned open as I carefully lifted it, and with a soft, rustling sigh, several pages slid silently onto the floor. I swear, I had no intention, not truly, of reading their private documents. But as I stooped to gather the scattered pages, my name, illuminated like a beacon, leaped out at me from a paragraph near the very bottom. A cold, insidious tendril of curiosity, irresistible and unwelcome, coiled around my gut, ruthlessly overcoming any lingering discretion. The legal language was formal, stiff, impenetrable to a casual glance, yet its meaning was painfully, unmistakably clear. Upon their deaths, my parents, Richard and Margaret, were irrevocably bequeathing their house, all their investments, their insurance policies, every single possession they owned, to Travis. The sole, singular exception, a cruel afterthought, was Margaret's mother's china set, a relic from another era, which would, condescendingly, go to our daughter Natalie. The impact was not just emotional, it was a physical blow, a sudden, brutal shockwave. The china set. It was incomplete, antiquated, ugly, and had been languishing, forgotten, in the dusty confines of the attic for decades. I had never, not once, expressed even a fleeting interest in it. My hands, suddenly alien, trembled violently as I desperately reread the paragraph, convinced, praying, that I had somehow misunderstood, that my eyes were playing tricks on me. But there it was, stark, undeniable, documented in unforgiving black and white. Travis, the perpetual burden, inherited everything of value, while I, the ever-present rock, was left with nothing but dusty, chipped dishes. Time itself became a viscous, suffocating fluid as I sat there, paralyzed, the papers shaking violently in my grasp, the bitter truth settling deep in my bones. Eventually, mercifully, Mom came searching for me, her footsteps light, oblivious. "Did you find the insurance policy, dear?" she asked, her voice cheerful, then froze, her gaze falling upon the incriminating papers clutched in my hands. Color drained from her face, leaving it ashen, stark. "Oh," she whispered, a soft, dying gasp. "Why?" I whispered back, my voice barely a thread, unraveling. She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes, wide with a sudden, dawning fear, called for Dad, an unspoken summons. He appeared moments later, his face etched with confusion that swiftly morphed into a hard, defensive anger upon recognizing the cursed will in my hands. "You shouldn't be reading our personal documents, Natalie," he said, his voice clipped, more irritated than genuinely guilty, a desperate attempt to deflect. "I was searching for the insurance papers, Dad," I shot back, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. "Mom asked me to find them. This just fell out." I held up the will, its pages a damning testament. "Why does everything, absolutely everything, go to Travis?" They exchanged a swift, meaningful glance, a silent, almost telepathic communication passing between them, a well-practiced dance of complicity. Finally, Mom, with a sigh that seemed to deflate her, settled beside me on the small, cramped office sofa, while Dad remained standing, his arms crossed defensively over his chest, a barrier. "Sweetheart," Mom began, her voice slipping into that saccharine, gentle tone reserved for patiently explaining complex, unpleasant concepts to a dim-witted child, "we love you both equally, truly. But Travis, you see, he just needs more assistance. He's always been so vulnerable. You've always been so capable, Natalie," Dad added, his voice flat, devoid of real warmth or praise. "You have a stable career, savings, security. Travis, he's struggled. He needs safety nets. He needs our help more." Bitterness, acrid and suffocating, flooded my voice. "So, my reward for decades of unwavering responsibility is absolutely nothing. While his reward for a lifetime of relentless irresponsibility is everything." "It's not like that, darling," Mom protested, her hand fluttering in a vague, dismissive gesture. "We're just being practical. Travis, he's promised to care for us in our declining years. He's promised to move in when we need help, darling, a real commitment." Incredulous, almost hysterical laughter bubbled up, escaping my throat, a harsh, unexpected sound. "Travis. The very same Travis who routinely forgets your birthday. Who has never, not once, maintained employment for longer than 8 months. That's who you're genuinely counting on, Mom and Dad. Your great hope for the future." "He's changing, Natalie," Dad insisted, his jaw tight, his voice strained. "He's more mature now. He's turning a corner. What about the $43,000 I've meticulously contributed over the past 6 years?" I demanded, the words stinging as they left my lips. Does any of that, count for nothing?" Mom looked genuinely, utterly surprised, as if I had spoken in a foreign tongue. "You've been keeping track, Natalie." "Of course, I've been tracking it," I retorted, my voice rising, vibrating with barely contained fury. "It's my money. My hard-earned money. Money that could have gone towards my own home, my own secure retirement, my own future." "We appreciate your help, Natalie," Dad said stiffly, his face rigid, his eyes cold, "but it doesn't, under any circumstances, entitle you to dictate our asset distribution. It's our money, and we will, absolutely, do what we want with it." His words, sharp and cutting, landed like physical blows, each one leaving a fresh, bleeding wound. All these years, all these agonizing sacrifices, I had genuinely believed I was helping my family, supporting them through difficult, trying times, a true partnership. Now, in this brutal, shattering moment, it felt as if I had been nothing more than an automated teller machine, a convenient, unquestioning source of cash, expected to give endlessly, without a single question, while they meticulously planned to reward Travis, the parasite, for contributing absolutely nothing. "It's just possessions, dear," Mom said, her voice suddenly cloyingly sweet, as she reached for my hand. I flinched, instinctively pulling away, as if her touch were scalding. "Family matters, Natalie, not material things. That's what's truly important. If it's merely just possessions," I challenged, my voice raw with a desperate, burgeoning fury, "then why, tell me why, couldn't you have simply split them equally? Why does Travis, and only Travis, get everything of value?" Neither of them had an answer, their silence a damning indictment. I should leave," I managed, my voice choked, standing abruptly, my body rigid with a sudden, overwhelming need to escape. The room, once a familiar comfort, now felt stifling, claustrophobic, the air too thick to breathe. "I need air. I can't breathe." "Natalie, please, darling, try to understand," Mom called after me, her voice a desperate, pleading whisper, as I blindly stumbled out of the room. "We love you. We love you, Natalie," Dad echoed, his voice devoid of conviction, making no move, not a single gesture, to stop my retreat. I simply nodded wordlessly, unable to speak, a massive, agonizing emotional obstruction lodged in my throat. I gathered my meager belongings from the dining room, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and departed without another word, the searing, damning image of that will seared irrevocably into my memory. The very moment I closed my car door, a sudden, violent torrent of tears erupted, hot, furious, blinding tears that blurred my vision so severely I couldn't even manage to insert the key into the ignition. I sat there, immobilized in their driveway, sobbing with a raw, uninhibited anguish I hadn't felt since the tumultuous, desperate days of adolescence. This wasn't merely about the will, though that document had been the brutal, undeniable catalyst. No, this was about a lifetime of feeling utterly undervalued, eternally second best, eternally less important than my brother, Travis. After what felt like an eternity, perhaps 15 minutes, when the violent emotional storm had finally subsided enough for me to see clearly and drive safely, I drove away from their house. Instead of heading home, I instinctively drove to the small, quiet park near my apartment, a familiar sanctuary where I often sought solace and contemplation. Sitting heavily on a cold bench overlooking the placid pond, I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling, and called Melissa. "They what?" she practically shrieked, her voice reverberating with disbelief, when I, in a shaky voice, relayed the devastating contents of the will. "After everything you've done for them, Nat, that is so beyond messed up." "I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper, my gaze fixed on a serene duck family paddling gracefully across the water, a stark contrast to my internal turmoil. I just don't understand how they could do this to me." "Because they take you for granted, Nat," Melissa said bluntly, her voice unwavering. "They know, deep down, that you'll always be there, always help, always be the responsible one. Meanwhile, Travis, the perpetual disappointment, gets rewarded for doing absolutely nothing." Her raw, unadulterated anger on my behalf felt like a cleansing balm, a powerful validation. I wasn't overreacting. This was genuinely, profoundly unfair. "What are you going to do, Nat?" she asked, her voice softening, laced with concern. I don't know yet," I admitted, the words catching in my throat. "I need to think. I need to just exist for a minute." After nearly an hour spent with Melissa, her steady presence a comfort, I called Daniel and asked to meet. At our favorite coffee shop, a familiar haunt that usually brought comfort, I recounted the entire, agonizing story again, the words tumbling out in a rush. Unlike Melissa's immediate, fiery outrage, Daniel listened quietly, his expression thoughtful, his eyes filled with a deep, silent understanding. "That really, truly sucks, Nat," he said, his voice soft when I finished, his hand reaching for mine, a comforting presence. "I can absolutely see why you're hurting so deeply." What would you do, Daniel?" I asked, my gaze pleading, desperate for guidance. He sipped his coffee, the silence stretching, heavy with unspoken thoughts, before he finally responded. "Honestly, Natalie, if I were you, I'd stop giving them money. Not out of spite, not as a punishment, but because it's so blindingly clear that it's unappreciated, unacknowledged, and completely taken for granted. You've been mercilessly sacrificing your own financial future for people who are clearly not considering you in theirs." "Not at all. But they are my parents," I stammered, voicing the deeply ingrained thought, the invisible chain that had been restraining me for so long. "What kind of daughter, Daniel, stops helping her own parents?" "The kind who has already helped more than most, Nat," Daniel replied gently, his eyes kind, unwavering. "The kind who desperately needs to start prioritizing herself, because it's glaringly obvious no one else is." "Not really." That night, alone in the suffocating silence of my apartment, sleep utterly eluded me, a cruel, mocking absence. My mind, a relentless replay button, churned with the agonizing conversation with my parents, the caustic words, the hollow excuses. I kept thinking of all the searing, brilliant responses I should have uttered, the truths I should have hurled back. Around 2 in the morning, fueled by a sudden, desperate surge of clarity, I rose from my bed and began to calculate, meticulously, mercilessly. I pulled out old bank statements, faded credit card bills, and meticulously organized budget spreadsheets from the past 6 years, each document a damning testament to my endless sacrifices. The final tally was staggering, breathtaking in its sheer magnitude. Beyond the blatant $43,000 in direct support, there were countless other expenses, smaller, insidious drains on my resources: groceries I'd paid for, household items I'd purchased, dinners I'd treated them to, never expecting repayment. The actual, devastating total approached a shocking $55,000. Then, with a chilling precision, I calculated what that staggering sum of money could have achieved for me, for my own life, for my own future. Conservative investments, even modest ones, would have generated significant, life-changing growth. A substantial down payment on a home, a cherished dream, would have meant true property ownership, a secure sanctuary, instead of the crushing burden of renting. Simple savings, consistently amassed, would have provided a substantial emergency fund, a comforting safety net, and a solid foundation for my retirement security. Instead, I had, with a naive, almost foolish generosity, handed it all over to parents who valued me so little, who thought so little of my efforts, that they were leaving me nothing but a box of antiquated china in their will. A cruel, mocking insult. I thought about all the countless sacrifices, each one a sharp, stinging reminder of what I had given up: the dream Japan vacation Daniel and I had heartbreakingly cancelled, our plans shattered, all for Mom's emergency dental work. The smaller, cramped apartment I rented, a deliberate sacrifice, just to afford their relentless mortgage contributions. My aging, constantly ailing car, a faithful but faltering companion, which I kept pouring money into, endlessly repairing, instead of replacing with something safe and reliable. All of it, every single bit, while Travis, the golden boy, lived his life carelessly, free of consequence, never contributing a single dime, yet somehow, inexplicably, deserving everything in their eyes, his idleness rewarded. By the harsh, unforgiving light of morning, my decision, sharp and clear, was irrevocably made. I meticulously created a new budget, ruthless in its efficiency, one that pointedly excluded any and all parental support. It felt, simultaneously, both liberating and terrifying. Suddenly, shockingly, I could afford things I had denied myself for years, dreams I had shelved indefinitely. Yet, a persistent, gnawing guilt, like a venomous snake, coiled in my gut, as if I were somehow abandoning my family, betraying some sacred, unspoken vow. Before I could reconsider, before the guilt could fully overwhelm me, I composed an email, my fingers flying over the keyboard. I chose written communication over a fraught, inevitably tearful phone call, a deliberate act to maintain clarity, to control the emotional chaos, knowing a conversation would quickly devolve into heated accusations, or dissolve into a puddle of my own tears. Dear Mom and Dad, I began, the words stark, formal. After discovering your will's contents yesterday, I've been reflecting deeply, with a painful clarity. I need to inform you that I can no longer, not truthfully, provide financial support. Over the past 6 years, I've contributed over $55,000 to your household, an enormous sum, all while actively delaying my own crucial financial goals. Learning that you plan to leave absolutely everything to Travis, while leaving me nothing of value, makes it painfully clear that my contributions haven't been truly valued or acknowledged by either of you. I love you both, I truly do, but I need, desperately need, to prioritize my own financial future now. It is my turn. I hope, sincerely, that you understand. Love, Natalie. I reviewed it countless times, meticulously tweaking words, sharpening phrases, before finally, with a trembling finger, hitting send. Then, with a decisive click, I turned off my phone, cutting the lifeline, and took a long, solitary walk, giving them time to absorb the blow, to process the stark, undeniable truth before dealing with their inevitable, furious response. When I cautiously reactivated my phone 3 hours later, the screen was a chaotic, blinking testament to their outrage, 5 missed calls from Mom, 3 from Dad, and a relentless barrage of texts, ranging wildly from confused pleas to wounded hurt to pure, unadulterated rage. "How could you do this to us?" one text from Mom shrieked, her words vibrating with outrage. "We never asked you for all that money." Dad had written, a blatant, convenient amnesia, conveniently forgetting the numerous, urgent requests for bill assistance, the desperate pleas. "Is this blackmail, Natalie? Is this your pathetic attempt to change our will?" was another, truly shocking message. I didn't respond to any of them. Not a single one. This wasn't about using money as leverage for some arbitrary inheritance. That wasn't the point at all. The crushing, undeniable point was that I had been, for years, systematically taken for granted, my generosity exploited, and I was, finally, irrevocably, standing up for myself. The very next day, a raw, tense Sunday, they appeared at my apartment, unannounced, their presence a looming shadow. Mom was crying, her face a crumpled mess of tears and mascara, and Dad looked both enraged and utterly bewildered, as if I had sprouted a second head. "We need to discuss your email, Natalie," he said, his voice clipped, when I hesitantly opened the door, a wall of palpable tension emanating from them. I let them in, forcing myself to maintain a composure I didn't entirely feel, my heart hammering like a trapped bird against my ribs. We sat in my small, suddenly suffocating living room, the air thick with unspoken accusations. "I meant what I wrote," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, cutting them off before they could even begin. "I cannot, and will not, continue supporting you financially." "Because of the will?" Mom asked, her voice a thin, reedy wail, as she dabbed her eyes with a crumpled tissue. "Is this, Natalie, truly about material possessions?" "No," I replied, my gaze unwavering, direct. "It's about respect. It's about acknowledgement." "The will, Mom," it simply clarified, with a devastating precision, "how you truly view my contributions, how little you value me." "We appreciate everything you've done, Natalie," Dad insisted, his voice stiff, rigid. "But that doesn't mean we owe you an inheritance. That's our right to decide." "I never, not once, said you did," I countered, my voice rising, gaining strength. "But discovering that you plan to reward Travis, the man who has contributed absolutely nothing, while relentlessly taking my boundless support for granted, made me realize, with a brutal clarity, that I need to reevaluate my priorities. My own life must come first." "So, you're punishing us, Natalie?" Mom whimpered, her face contorted in a mask of wounded indignation. "I'm taking care of myself," I corrected, my voice firm, resolute. "Something I should have, truly, done years ago, something you never taught me to do." The conversation, a relentless, emotionally draining battle, circled for nearly 2 agonizing hours. They tried every tactic in their manipulative arsenal: guilt, anger, and finally, a desperate, transparent bargaining, suggesting they might reconsider the will, they hinted, if I would just continue helping them. That final, pathetic tactic only cemented my resolve, hardening my heart. Their love, it seemed, was not unconditional. It was a transactional facade, conditional on what I could endlessly provide. They left without any resolution, both clearly upset, their faces tight with resentment. I closed the door behind them, leaning against it, exhausted but strangely, profoundly peaceful. For the first time in years, I had, with a terrifying courage, put myself first. The weeks that followed were some of the most agonizing, yet ultimately transformative, of my entire life. My parents, it seemed, launched what felt like a coordinated, relentless campaign to break my resolve, to change my mind. It began with daily, incessant phone calls, alternating between insidious guilt trips and furious, baseless accusations. "The electric bill is due next week, Natalie," Mom would say, her voice trembling just slightly, a practiced tremor. "I simply don't know how we'll ever manage without your help. We might have to sell the house, Natalie," Dad warned during another, equally manipulative call, his voice laced with ominous threat. Is that truly what you want for us? For your own parents to lose their home? I remained stubbornly firm, unyielding, though each brutal conversation left me emotionally drained, a hollowed-out shell. I'm truly sorry you're struggling, became my standard, practiced response, a shield against their barbs, but I can no longer be your financial support. That chapter is closed. When the relentless phone calls proved utterly ineffective, they escalated their tactics, resorting to unannounced, unsettling visits, sometimes together, a united front of despair, sometimes individually, hoping to catch me off guard. Often, they arrive bearing small, seemingly innocent gifts, or a plate of homemade food, before inevitably launching into their familiar, exhausting arguments, twisting the knife. We raised you better than this, Natalie, Dad declared during one particularly infuriating visit, his voice heavy with a manufactured disappointment that sought to crush my spirit. Family helps family. That's what we taught you. Yes, I agreed, my voice surprisingly steady, family does help family. But it should be reciprocal, Dad, a two-way street. It should be appreciated, not merely expected, not just taken, endlessly. The pressure, it seemed, didn't come only from my parents. Soon, other family members, their ears clearly poisoned by my parents' narrative, began to call. My Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, was particularly persistent, her voice a relentless drone of disapproval. Your mother is absolutely beside herself, Natalie, she droned during one call, her voice dripping with judgment. How, tell me how, can you do this to your own parents? Did they, Aunt Linda, tell you about the will? I asked, my voice cutting through her self-righteousness, direct and piercing. There was a stunned pause, a beat of uncomfortable silence. Well, no, Natalie, but that's private family business, isn't it? Exactly, Aunt Linda, I replied, a sharp retort. And this is between me and my parents. No one else. My cousin Susan, a perpetual gossip, texted, heard you're having money problems, national hope things improve so you can help Aunt Margaret and Uncle Richard again. They are struggling, you know. They were, I realized, actively rewriting the narrative, twisting the truth, portraying me as some financially unstable mess, rather than admitting the ugly, inconvenient truth that they had ruthlessly exploited me for years, systematically bleeding me dry. It was far easier, wasn't it, than confronting the raw, uncomfortable truth. Throughout this harrowing ordeal, Travis, in his own oblivious bubble, remained blissfully unaware, untouched by the storm he had, inadvertently, created. According to Melissa, who had encountered him casually at a local bar, he had absolutely no idea about the conflict, or the will, or anything. Your brother, Nat, he was buying rounds for everyone, Melissa reported, her voice laced with incredulity, definitely not acting like someone even remotely concerned about his parents' dire financial situation. The relentless stress, the emotional toll, began to visibly affect my work performance. I found myself missing deadlines, making uncharacteristic, sloppy errors, my focus fractured. Sleep became an elusive, mocking phantom as I lay awake, replaying agonizing conversations, or mentally rehearsing endless responses to their anticipated, manipulative arguments. Daniel, ever observant, noticed the devastating toll it was taking. Maybe, Natalie, he suggested one evening, his voice gentle, as we sat on my couch, my head resting heavily on his shoulder, maybe you should talk to someone professional about this. A therapist could really help you process everything, help you navigate this emotional minefield. It was sound advice, profoundly logical, yet it felt like a monumental step. The very next week, I had my first appointment with Dr. Levine, a family therapist, her name recommended by a kind, understanding colleague. What you're experiencing, Natalie, she explained, her voice calm and insightful, after I had poured out my entire, agonizing story, the words tumbling out in a cathartic rush, is a classic case of family role dysfunction. You, for far too long, have been cast as the responsible caretaker, the fixer, while your brother, Travis, occupies the role of the perpetual child, the vulnerable one who constantly needs protection and endless support. These deeply ingrained roles, Natalie, they become incredibly rigid over time, and they are, tragically, immensely difficult to change. So, Dr. Levine, I asked, my voice raw with a desperate plea, what do I do? How do I even begin to untangle this mess? You've already taken the first, and perhaps the hardest, step, Natalie, she said, her eyes kind, unwavering. By setting that boundary, that clear, undeniable line. Now, your task is to maintain it, fiercely, while simultaneously learning to manage your own swirling, tumultuous emotions about the entire situation. We meticulously developed strategies for handling the insidious, pervasive guilt, crafted concise, unyielding scripts for responding to their predictable, manipulative attempts, and practice techniques for staying calm, centered, even during the most explosive confrontations. Perhaps most importantly, Dr. Levine validated my agonizing decision, her words a balm to my wounded soul. It's not selfish, Natalie, to protect yourself from exploitation, she assured me, her voice firm, resolute. In fact, it's absolutely necessary for your emotional well-being, for your very survival. Daniel remained my unwavering anchor, my steadfast lighthouse during this turbulent, dark period. He listened patiently, without a hint of judgment, offered practical, tangible support, and, crucially, provided welcome distraction when I desperately needed to think about something, anything else. He witnessed my raw tears, my burning anger, and those terrifying moments of weakness, the edges of my resolve fraying, when I almost gave in, almost crumbled under the immense pressure. And he never once, not a single time, suggested I should resume helping my parents for the sake of an ephemeral, deceptive peace. I admire your courage, Natalie, he told me one night, his voice soft, filled with genuine respect. Standing up to family, truly standing your ground, is one of the hardest things anyone can ever do. 1 month, precisely 30 long, arduous days, after the earth-shattering discovery of the will and my decisive act of cutting off financial support, I reached a significant, deeply personal milestone. I confidently declined a call from my mother, the familiar ring a mere whisper of its former power, and felt, for the first time, not a crushing wave of guilt, but a quiet, almost exhilarating sense of peace afterward. It was a small victory, yes, almost imperceptible to an outsider, but to me, it was monumental, deeply meaningful. That very same day, a text message arrived from my aunt, her words laden with thinly veiled accusation, stating that my parents were struggling, truly struggling, to make ends meet and had, tragically, begun selling their cherished possessions. It was clearly, unequivocally, meant to induce a fresh wave of guilt, to break my resolve, but instead, a strange, new thought bloomed in my mind. Why, I wondered, were they not asking Travis for help? I had, countless times, suggested it, offered it as a solution, but they always had their litany of excuses. He was between jobs, he had his own bills, he simply wasn't good with money. All of it, true, yes, but all of it, every single excuse, things they were perfectly willing to overlook, to forgive, while relentlessly expecting me to continue sacrificing my entire life. The next family gathering, my cousin Ryan's wedding, loomed on the horizon like a storm cloud. I debated, agonized over, not attending, desperate to avoid the inevitable, suffocating confrontation. But Dr. Levine, with her quiet wisdom, gently encouraged me to go. Avoidance, Natalie, she pointed out, her voice calm, only reinforces the insidious idea that you've done something wrong, that you are somehow at fault. Showing up, confidently, radiating self-possession, sends a powerful, entirely different message. So I went. With Daniel, my steadfast partner, by my side, an unwavering pillar of support. The ceremony was lovely, a blow of white lace and soft music, but the reception, a stark contrast, was fraught with a palpable tension that hung heavy in the air. My parents sat conspicuously at a different table, occasionally casting furtive, resentful glances my way, but making no move, no gesture, to approach. Other relatives, like vultures, whispered conspiratorially among themselves, some offering furtive, sympathetic nods, others clearly, openly judging my choices. My Aunt Linda, relentless in her pursuit, cornered me at the bar, her voice sharp, accusatory. "Family comes first, Natalie, no matter what," she lectured, her voice a piercing whine. "That's how we were raised. It's tradition." "I agree, Aunt Linda, that family is incredibly important," I replied, my voice calm, unwavering, using one of the carefully rehearsed scripts Dr. Levine and I had practiced endlessly. "But respect, true respect, and genuine appreciation, they need to be mutual. They need to be given freely, by all parties." She looked skeptical, her face a mask of disapproval, but mercifully, she was called away by another relative before she could launch into another tirade. Later, Travis, fashionably late as always, arrived at the reception, already slightly intoxicated, his eyes a little too bright. He greeted our parents with effusive warmth, completely oblivious, it seemed, to the palpable tension that permeated the room, blind to the storm raging around him. He spotted me across the hall, his eyes crinkling in a familiar, casual smile, and waved cheerfully, as if nothing, absolutely nothing, was wrong between us. Either my parents hadn't breathed a single word to him about our raw, agonizing conflict, or he simply didn't care enough to remember it. As the evening wore on, a slow, agonizing crawl, I couldn't help but overhear tantalizing, infuriating snippets of conversation between my parents and other relatives. They spoke, with theatrical sighs, of their dire financial difficulties, the crushing medical bills they struggled to pay, the essential repairs the house desperately needed, all within agonizingly clear earshot, clearly, unequivocally intended for me to overhear. A calculated, emotional ambush. Daniel, sensing my rising anger, gently squeezed my hand under the table, his touch a grounding force. "You okay, Nat?" he whispered, his voice laced with concern. I nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. Better than I expected, actually. And I was. The guilt, a familiar, unwelcome companion, still lingered, a faint echo, but it was less overwhelming now, less suffocating. I was, slowly, painfully, beginning to truly, deeply believe that I deserved so much more than to be their convenient financial safety net, their endless ATM, while being valued less, far less, than my perpetually irresponsible brother. A few short days after the wedding, a mundane Tuesday, my phone pinged with a text message from my mother, a message that would, with its chilling brevity, shatter the last remnants of my naive hope and change absolutely everything. No warm greeting, no pretense of small talk, just 5 stark, brutal words that laid bare, with a devastating precision, exactly how she truly viewed our relationship, how little I meant beyond my utility. "The mortgage is due $1,450. When my phone delivered that chilling Tuesday morning message, I was meticulously preparing for a crucial client presentation, my mind sharp, focused. I glanced at it briefly, expecting the usual encouraging message from Daniel, or a quick question from a colleague. Instead, it was from my mother. "The mortgage is due $1,450. No hi, no how are you, not even my name. Just a cold, bald demand for money, as if I were nothing more than a functional, emotionless ATM." Emotions surged, a violent, chaotic wave, a burning hurt, a searing anger, an incredulous disbelief. After an entire month of minimal contact, after all our agonizing, tearful conversations about boundaries and respect, this was how she chose to reach out, to communicate. I set my phone down slowly, deliberately, and took several deep, shuddering breaths, meticulously employing the calming techniques Dr. Levine had so patiently taught me. When I felt a semblance of calm return, I stared at the message, its starkness a taunt, my mind racing, desperately considering how to respond. My first instinct, primal and raw, was to type a lengthy, scathing explanation of why her message was so utterly inappropriate, so deeply hurtful, so fundamentally wrong. My second, equally strong, was to simply ignore it entirely, to let it vanish into the digital ether. Neither felt right, neither felt truly satisfying. I typed several responses, my fingers flying over the keyboard, only to furiously delete each one, words crumbling into dust. I already told you I can't help financially anymore. Have you even bothered to ask Travis for help, Mom? This, Mom, is exactly why I had to set boundaries in the first place. None of them, not a single one, truly captured the raw, searing indignation, the utter pain, of what I really wanted to scream, that I deserved, absolutely deserved, to be treated as a cherished daughter. A human being, not merely a convenient, exploitable financial resource. Finally, after nearly 20 agonizing minutes of deliberation, my mind a churning vortex of emotions, I typed 2 simple, unyielding words, and with a fierce, defiant stab of my thumb, hit send. Ask Travis. It was direct. It was clear. It was precise. And it unapologetically reminded her of the fundamental reason for our current, fractured situation, without being unnecessarily cruel, without stooping to her level. The response was almost immediate, a relentless, furious barrage. A series of scathing messages from my mother, each one a fresh assault. How dare you, Natalie? After everything we've done for you, you ungrateful girl. Travis has absolutely nothing to do with this. We need help now, Natalie. We are desperate. I didn't respond to any of them. Not one. Instead, I silenced my phone, the digital noise mercifully cut off, and forced myself to return to my presentation preparation, though my concentration, my focus, had been utterly, irrevocably shattered. That evening, my father called. I almost didn't answer, my finger hovering over the screen, but then, with a deep, shaky breath, I decided it was better, cleaner, to face this head-on, to stand my ground. Your mother is in tears, Natalie, he said, his voice clipped, devoid of preamble, the moment I picked up. I'm truly sorry to hear that, Dad, I replied, my voice surprisingly even, level, betraying none of the turmoil raging within. What kind of response was that, Natalie? Asked Travis. Do you, for 1 second, think this is some kind of sick joke? His voice was tight, strained with fury. No, Dad, I said, my voice unwavering, I don't think this is a joke at all. I think it's a perfectly logical, perfectly reasonable suggestion. You've chosen Travis to inherit every single thing you own, every valuable asset. It makes perfect sense, then, that he should bear the responsibility to help preserve those assets. He should be protecting his future inheritance. Travis isn't, Natalie, in a position to help right now, Dad said, his voice laced with exasperated frustration, a familiar, tired refrain. And I'm no longer, Dad, in a position to be endlessly taken for granted, I countered, my voice firm, resolute. He was silent for a long moment, the heavy quiet stretching between us, then, with a sigh of resignation, he said, we need to talk about this in person, Natalie. All of us. Including Travis. This needs to be resolved. I agreed to dinner at their house that Friday. It would be the first time, the first truly honest time, all 4 of us had been together, truly together, since that earth-shattering discovery of the will. When Friday arrived, a day I had dreaded, I felt a gnawing anxiety, yes, but also a quiet, fierce sense of preparation. Dr. Levine and I had meticulously discussed strategies for the meeting, rehearsing scenarios, and Daniel, bless his patient heart, had helped me role-play responses to every likely argument, every possible manipulation. He offered, without hesitation, to accompany me, a comforting presence, but I knew, deep down, this was something I needed to face alone, to handle on my own terms. I arrived at precisely 6:30, the agreed-upon time, my footsteps light on the familiar path. My parents' house, so familiar, so steeped in memories, looked identical to always, unchanging in its exterior, but it felt profoundly different now, knowing what I now knew about my true, insignificant place in their meticulously planned lives. Mom answered the door, her face a stark, unsettling mixture of anger and worry, her eyes red-rimmed. She didn't offer a hug, no warm embrace, as she normally would have. Travis is already here, Natalie, she said, her voice strained, as she led me directly to the dining room where Dad and Travis sat, stiff and uncomfortable, at the table. Travis looked utterly confused, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by a furrowed brow. "Hey, sis," he greeted me with his usual casual wave, a phantom of normalcy. "What's this big family meeting all about? Mom and Dad are being super mysterious, you know." So, I thought, a small, cold triumph blossoming in my chest, they hadn't told him. Interesting. We sat down to a strained pot roast dinner, Dad's favorite, the food tasting like ash in my mouth. Conversation was stilted, artificial, forced, clinging desperately to safe, innocuous topics like the weather, or Travis's latest, ephemeral job prospect, a food delivery app he was developing, he claimed, with a friend. A venture that sounded, with disheartening familiarity, exactly like all his other spectacular, failed endeavors. Finally, as Mom served coffee and her famous apple pie for dessert, Dad cleared his throat, the sound a harbinger of the inevitable. "We need to discuss family finances," he began, his voice flat, formal. "As you both know, your mother and I are facing some challenges. Medical bills, they just keep accumulating, and with reduced income from both our jobs, we are falling dangerously behind." Travis nodded sympathetically, his face a picture of concern, but he said nothing, offered no solutions. "Natalie has been helping us for several years," Dad continued, his eyes flickering towards me, a fleeting, almost accusing glance, "but she recently decided she can no longer do so. She's abandoned us." Travis looked genuinely surprised, his eyebrows shooting up. "Really? Why not, Nat?" Before I could even begin to formulate a response, Mom, with a desperate, almost hysterical urgency, jumped in. "She found our will, Travis, and she's terribly upset about it." "It's all about the will." "Your will?" Travis looked even more confused, his brow furrowed deeper. "What does that, Mom, have to do with absolutely anything?" "They are leaving everything to you, Travis," I said directly, my voice steady, clear, cutting through the murky air. "The house, the investments, everything they own, every valuable thing, except Grandma's old, dusty china set, which, apparently, goes to me." Travis's eyebrows shot up again, practically hitting his hairline. "Everything? Like, everything. The whole enchilada?" Dad, with a weary nod, confirmed it. "We thought it was the best, most practical arrangement, son. You need more support than your sister. You always have. And I've been supporting them for 6 years, Travis," I added, my voice burning with a quiet, controlled fury. "Over $55,000 in direct financial help, plus countless other forms of tangible support, all while you, Travis, have contributed absolutely nothing, not a single penny." Travis had the grace, for once, to look genuinely embarrassed, a rare display of discomfort. I didn't know it was that much, Nat," he mumbled, his gaze fixed on his pie. "It wouldn't matter if you knew or not, Travis," I said, my voice sharp, unforgiving. "The point is that I've been relentlessly taken for granted, expected to give without question, or appreciation, while you, for your perpetual idleness, get rewarded with everything. It's a sick joke." "That's not fair, Natalie." Mom protested, her voice rising in a wail of indignation, tears springing to her eyes. "We appreciate everything you've done for us." "Do you?" I challenged, my gaze unwavering, pinning her. "Because your text this week, Mom, it didn't show appreciation. It showed a staggering, breathtaking entitlement." "What text?" Travis asked, his head snapping up, his eyes wide. I pulled out my phone, navigating to the message, and showed him the stark, cold demand: "The mortgage is due $1,450. He winced, a visible shudder. "Yeah, Mom, that's pretty bad. Pretty brazen." "We were desperate, Travis," she defended, her voice shrill. "And where, Mom, Dad?" I asked, turning my gaze to Travis. "Where were you, Travis, when they needed help?" Where have you been for the past 6 years while I've been, single-handedly, supporting them, keeping them afloat? He shrugged uncomfortably, his eyes darting away. I've had my own stuff going on, you know. Your own stuff? I repeated, my voice dripping with contempt. Like what, Travis? Another string of failed business ventures. Another endless series of jobs you quit because they were too boring, too demanding. Meanwhile, I've put my entire life on hold, my dreams shelved, to help Mom and Dad, to keep their heads above water. Nobody asked you to do that, Natalie, Dad suddenly interjected, his voice surprisingly cold, cutting. Yes, Dad, you did. I countered, my voice cracking, a raw, undeniable truth. Every single time you called about a bill you couldn't possibly pay. Every single time you mentioned a medical expense not covered by insurance, a desperate plea. Every single time you sighed, dramatically, about how worried you were about making the mortgage payment. Those, Dad, were all asks. Every single one of them, insidious asks. The conversation spiraled, growing hotter, more volatile, the air thick with accusations and long-held resentments. My parents, a united front, stubbornly defended their will decision, insisting it was their inviolable right to distribute their assets as they, and only they, saw fit. Travis, predictably, remained mostly quiet, a silent spectator, occasionally trying to diffuse the explosive tension with pathetic, clumsy jokes that landed with a dull, sickening thud. Then, during a particularly intense, emotionally charged exchange about fairness and family obligation, Travis, in a moment of startling, brutal honesty, uttered something that made everything, with a sudden, horrifying clarity, fall into place. Look, Nat, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, a rare moment of empathy. I get why you're totally upset, I really do. But I'm the son, you know. In our family, the son inherits. That's just how it's always been, right? The room, with a sudden, deafening finality, went silent. My parents, their faces pale, looked profoundly uncomfortable, their eyes darting away, pointedly avoiding my gaze, their guilt a palpable presence. Is that true? I asked them, my voice barely a whisper, yet resonating with a terrifying power. Is this truly about gender? Is that the reason? Of course not, darling. Mom said quickly, a frantic, desperate denial, but her eyes, betraying her, darted involuntarily towards Dad, a flicker of silent communication. It's tradition, Natalie, Dad finally admitted, his voice stiff, burdened by generations of unspoken rules. My father left everything to me, not my sisters. His father did the same. It's the way of things. A strange, almost ethereal sense of clarity washed over me, cold and precise, like an icy plunge. This wasn't, not truly, about Travis needing more support, or being less stable, or being somehow more vulnerable. It wasn't even, entirely, about my contributions being utterly unappreciated, though they clearly, undeniably were. No. This was about an archaic, deeply ingrained, sexist tradition that brutally valued sons over daughters, regardless of merit, regardless of contribution, regardless of endless sacrifice. It's 2023, I said quietly, my voice raw with a newfound, terrifying power. Not 1923, Dad. Times change, Natalie, Dad replied stiffly, defensively. Values don't. Not true values. If your values, Dad, include treating your own daughter as inherently less valuable than your son, I said, standing slowly, deliberately, my gaze fixed on his, unwavering, despite all evidence to the contrary, despite all my efforts, then perhaps, just perhaps, they should change. I think I've heard enough tonight. I really have. I walked out, my back straight, my head held high, ignoring their desperate, pleading calls for me to come back, their voices echoing hollowly in the sudden silence. As I drove home, the familiar streets blurring, I felt lighter, somehow, as if a monumental weight, a crushing burden I had carried, uncomplaining, for years, had finally, miraculously, been lifted from my shoulders. The truth, raw and painful as it was, had brought with it a searing, undeniable clarity. The very next day, a text message pinged from Travis, that was intense, national. "Are you okay? Really?" "I will be, Travis," I replied, my fingers still trembling slightly. "For what it's worth, Nat," he wrote back, a surprisingly thoughtful response, "I think you're right. The whole son inherits everything thing is pretty messed up, actually." I had absolutely no idea that was their actual reasoning. It was something, at least. A small acknowledgement, a tiny glimmer, that the situation, that their choices, were profoundly, undeniably unfair. In the days that followed, a predictable, exhausting flurry, I received several more messages from my parents, alternating wildly between furious, defensive justifications and desperate, cloying attempts at reconciliation. I responded politely, but briefly, consistently maintaining the firm, unyielding boundary I had so painstakingly, so courageously set. The months following that explosive family dinner confrontation were nothing short of transformative, a period of profound, undeniable growth. Without the crushing financial burden of perpetually supporting my parents, I suddenly found myself with resources I hadn't possessed in years, not just financial, but emotional, a quiet abundance. The very first thing I did, a symbolic act of self-care, was to meet with a trusted financial advisor. With my new, meticulously crafted budget, I could, astonishingly, increase my retirement contributions, begin to aggressively save for a long-dreamed-of house down payment, and even, thrillingly, start planning for that Japan vacation Daniel and I had so heartbreakingly postponed 3 years earlier. "You're actually in better financial shape than many people your age, Natalie," the advisor told me, her voice reassuring. "You have a good, steady income and minimal debt. Without those extra, insidious expenses for your parents, you can make truly significant progress towards your goals in just a few years. It's remarkable." It was profoundly validating to hear, to finally realize, that my financial decisions, my lifelong diligence, had been sound, solid, aside from the vast sums of money I had foolishly, generously given away. With a clear, tangible plan firmly in place, I felt more secure about my future, my own path, than I had felt in years, a comforting, unfamiliar stability. Therapy with Dr. Levine continued to be instrumental, a guiding light in my ongoing healing process. We delved deeper, meticulously, into the complex, insidious family dynamics that had so profoundly shaped my relationships, my entire being. "What you experienced, Natalie, is unfortunately common, far more common than you might imagine," she explained, her voice calm, empathetic, during one insightful session. "Many families, even seemingly progressive ones, still carry these unconscious, deeply ingrained gender biases that profoundly affect how they treat their sons versus their daughters. It's a silent poison." We meticulously worked through practical exercises, tools to help me recognize and actively challenge these deeply internalized expectations, the insidious voices that had whispered in my ear for so long. I had spent so much of my precious life, so much energy, desperately trying to prove my worth through relentless responsibility and endless sacrifice, foolishly believing that if I just did enough, if I just gave enough, my parents would, eventually, value me as much as they so effortlessly valued Travis. Now, finally, mercifully, I was learning to find my intrinsic worth within myself, independent of their approval, a precious, newfound freedom. "Your value, Natalie," Dr. Levine reminded me, her voice firm, resolute, "isn't determined by what you tirelessly do for others. It's inherent. It's intrinsic to who you are, to your very being." My relationship with Daniel deepened, growing stronger, more resilient, through this challenging, transformative period. He had seen me at my most vulnerable, my most raw, and he had stood by me, unwavering, without a single hint of judgment, his love a steady beacon. We began discussing our future more seriously, more intimately, including, thrillingly, the very real possibility of marriage, a life built together. "I love how much stronger you've become, Natalie," he told me one evening, his voice soft, filled with genuine admiration, as we walked hand in hand along the riverfront, the city lights shimmering reflections on the water. Not that you were ever weak, not truly, but there's a newfound confidence in you now, a quiet power that's truly beautiful to witness. My friendships, too, deepened, blossoming into something richer, more supportive. Melissa, ever the organizer, created a lifeline, a support group of sorts, intimate monthly dinners with friends who had navigated similar, painful family dynamics. Sharing our stories, our struggles, our hard-won strategies, was profoundly therapeutic, a collective balm to our wounded souls, and I no longer felt so agonizingly alone in my struggle. At work, my performance soared, unburdened by the relentless, suffocating stress of my parents' financial needs weighing on my mind. I was more focused, more creative, more willing to take calculated risks, to push the boundaries. 6 short months after courageously setting my boundary, after reclaiming my life, I received a well-deserved promotion and a substantial raise, a tangible reward for my newfound clarity and dedication. Meanwhile, according to sympathetic family friends who, occasionally, still kept in touch with me, my parents were, predictably, struggling. Without my constant, unwavering financial support, they had been forced, mercilessly, to make difficult, painful choices, to face the consequences of their own actions. They had, inevitably, begun the heartbreaking process of selling their cherished possessions, beginning with Dad's extensive collection of vintage watches, each tick a reminder of their changing fortunes.